Preparing your Linux server. In this module, we're going to be setting up a server to work with our endpoint. We're going to be taking a dedicated Linux server and getting it set up and configured to be an IoT endpoint. In this module, we're going to create a regular user account to run our application. We're going to give that user account sudo privileges, and then we're going to update the system. Now we're going to get your Linux server ready. For this task, I chose to use a DigitalOcean server running Debian Linux. This server comes with a root account and password already created. So the first thing we want to do is create a regular user account for running the application. You don't want to be logged in as root on your server unless you absolutely have to be, because it makes you vulnerable to certain attacks. And quite frankly, it's dangerous to always be poking around as root. The first thing we want to do is create a regular user account for running our application. You don't want to be logged in as root on your server unless you absolutely have to be, because it makes you vulnerable to certain attacks. And quite frankly, it's kind of dangerous to always be poking around as root. So let's get started. Here we're going to type in add user web. And now we want to enter a secure password. Now here you can follow the prompts and add as much info as you'd like. Next, we want to make sure that that user has ownership of its own home folder. We do this by typing in chown web:users/home/web. This creates a home directory and ensures the user can modify the files in that directory. Now we need to add the ability for this user to perform sudo operations. Sudo allows you to do the things that the root account can do without being logged in as root. As you may have guessed, you'll need to add this permission as a root user though. People cannot add themselves to sudo. What is sudo? Sudo is a program designed for system administrators to allow some users to execute commands as root. Basically, you want to give as few privileges as possible, but still allow that user to accomplish tasks. Now you could log in as root to do everything, but sudo has some great advantages. The user does not need to know the root password in order to do root things. And it's easy to run only commands that require root privileges, and the rest of the time you can run commands under your user account, which is much safer. Additionally, the system administrator can log each sudo command to see what user did what thing. So let's get started. Here's how we'll add that web user to the sudo group. Here we're going to type in apt-get install sudo. Now that that's done, type in the following. This opens up a text editor and you can add the web user to the list of people allowed to use sudo. Scroll down to the user privilege specification and add the following. Now, as you can see, we've added the same permissions that root has. So let's go ahead and type in Ctrl-X to exit and save the file. Select Yes to save it. Now we can verify the user functionality and make sure that it can perform sudo operations. So we'll type in exit to log off. And now we want to SSH into the server with the new user information that we created earlier. Now in my case, I'm using internetofthings.jeremymorgan.com. So what I'm going to do is SSH web at internetofthings.jeremymorgan.com, and the web account is the one that we created earlier. So now I'm logged in as the web user. Now to check our sudo privileges, let's update everything. We need to do that anyway. Now you'll notice it asked for my password there, and when I typed in that password, I was given root permissions to update the entire system. And now we'll do the sudo apt-get upgrade. Now if that doesn't work, run sudo again and make sure the line is exactly as we've shown. If it did work, then your system is updated and ready to go. In this module, we added a regular user account, then we made sure that that user could run certain commands as a root by using sudo. We described why that's a good practice and what sudo is. Then we updated our system. Now on to the next module where we'll set up a database.